morning. This is a reading from Whispers from Eternity by Paramhansa Yogananda. These are prayer poems. This is the demand to see God's love in all human love. With the love of all human loves, I have come to thee, thou, God of all loves. Thou art the Father, anxious to protect his children. Thou art the little child, lisping love to its parents. Thou art the mother, showering infinite kindnesses upon all her family. Thou dost flow in the all-surrendering love of the lover for the beloved. Thou art the love of friends for one another. Purify me with the reverence of a servant to his master. Teach me to love thee with all pure loves, for thou art the fountain of love, both earthly and heavenly. Bathe me in the fountain spray of all loves. And this next reading is from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda, which are parallel commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. This carries on the, I don't want to say the tradition, but the teaching of Master, because Master in his Sunday satsangs would give a quote from the Bible, show how the Bible and the Gita agreed on various points of teaching. And in fact, Swamiji created these readings based on that. I'll come back to that point. What I wanted to say was before that the reason why Master compared these two scriptures is because Sri Yukteswarji, his guru, had done so in the Holy Science, where it has quotes from the Bible, quotes from the Shastras, showing, again, the same teaching. And of course, if you know the story, Sri Yukteswarji came to write that book because Mahavatar Babaji had asked him to. And so really this whole mission, this whole pattern, this thing that we do every single Sunday, which after a certain point can seem routine. I don't mean the teachings seem routine, but the fact that we cover these teachings, yeah, well of course we do, that's what we do. But we do it because Master did it, because Sri Yukteswarji did it, and because Babaji told us to. So I also say that because it makes Babaji perhaps feel a little closer, that every Sunday you're following his instructions that he gave to Sri Yukteswarji, as he said, for the benefit of mankind, which includes all of us too. Now I don't mean, of course you probably imagine that mankind includes you too. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that Babaji perhaps was even thinking of us then, when he asked Sri Yukteswarji to write that book, seeing the implications of how this energy would continue. But even if Babaji wasn't thinking of us at that moment in Allahabad, you can be sure he's thinking of us now. So Swamiji wrote these commentaries to cover basically all the primary points of the spiritual path throughout the year. And so each week covers a different topic, but it's not just a random topic, and it's not just a collection or a masala of different topics that, okay, this is good enough, we need 52, and so this meets 52. But it's a whole trajectory starting from the beginning of the year, how did God manifest this universe in the first place, and then getting into other topics, including the soul's destiny. And so now that we're in November, and there are only 7 weeks or so left in the year, so we're in these last topics, these last teachings from the book. And this is, why tell God anything when he knows everything? Why offer God anything when he has everything? The questions that sometimes come to devotees' minds. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Jesus Christ teaches as the ideal prayer one that addresses very human demands to God. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Jesus himself says, just before suggesting this prayer, "Your Father knoweth what things you have need of before you ask him." Why, then, his recommendation that we pray for anything? The answer is that we should offer ourselves up in acceptance of his abundance. Don't pester God as though constantly pulling on his sleeve to get his attention. Approach him with the confidence of a child in its parent. And in that spirit, then, ask him lovingly, but with complete trust, as though demanding your birthright, and without the slightest doubt in your mind that he wants only your best. For you don't have to persuade him the way a beggar or a stranger might. You are his own child. God knows everything already. He knows what is in your heart. It is you who need to clarify your feelings, that you attune yourself to him, in turn, more clearly. For only by such clarity will you be able to receive perfectly what he gives you. For the same reason, we need to offer ourselves to him, not because he needs anything from us, except, as Yogananda said, our love, to complete his love for us, but because by self-giving, we expand our awareness from its confinement in the little ego outward to infinity. Those who partake of the nectar remaining after a sacrifice, says the Bhagavad Gita in the 4th chapter, attain to the infinite spirit. That person, however, who makes no sacrifices, never truly succeeds in enjoying even the blessings of this material world. How then could he attain happiness in subtler realms? Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. This is a very beautiful reading and teaching, because in it we find the purpose of why we have to ask God anything, why we have to tell him anything. Again, if he knows everything, why should we bother telling him? If he's taking care of every need that we have, as Jesus said, he knows what you need even before you ask it. And if we think of the other reading from the affirmation, see, everything is coming from God's hand. It can seem more or less determined, scripted. This starts to get near the other difficult question on the spiritual path. How much free will do we even have in this world? How much of it is just scripted out that, as Swamiji said, God knows what color tie you're going to wear in the morning. And then he said, of course, people aren't wearing ties much these days, but you can imagine what color dupatta you're wearing, what kind of shirt or pants you're going to wear today. And he said, and you can't reach for it in the closet and then at the last minute change. He said he would see that too. And so we start to wonder, he knows everything, so why do we have to tell him everything? He's giving us everything that he wants, so why do we have to ask him? He also, it seems to be, maybe we have not much free will in the matter. It's all according to karma or kismet anyway. And then putting it to another question, I mean, that's also similarly relating and getting at the same point. Why do anything in this world? It's all God's show. It's all a dream. It's a dream in my mind. It's a dream in the other person's mind. Anything we do is just going to disappear in time. It's all going to become dust. And even if we help people, they too are going to become dust and so on. It all ends up being dust. It's a lot of dust. And so, what's the purpose of bothering with any of it? Another thing is, what if I've worked really hard in something and then it failed? Then I tried really hard to get something in by the deadline, but it didn't succeed. Or I tried to apply for some job and was rejected. Or any kinds of these outward failures. What was the point then, you see? And even though it may seem obvious to you if you've been on the spiritual path, remember, though this thought may not enter our minds in ways that aren't important to us, like, well, I understand that if I didn't get that job, it wasn't the right job for me anyway, and a new opportunity is coming, and I have learned how to say that to myself to feel better, and so, I'm fine. So we can smile at, yes, I know. But what about when our meditation doesn't go so well? Do we sometimes criticize ourselves? Gosh, what was the point of even sitting there? Or I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. You see, it sneaks in ways that matter to us, or ways in which we haven't yet clarified our understanding. And so, all of this, what's the point if it's all fate? What's the point if God knows it all? Why do we have to know anything? And what if we don't succeed? Then what was the point of that? What is the point of anything? They all have the same answer as is given in the reading. The point is, what do we become through these experiences? What do we learn? How do we grow in understanding? How do we channel more of God's light? How do we help others, which does matter because they do live on, as the Gita says elsewhere, and also we live on. And as Swamiji said, that self-offering is an easy way for us to expand our self-identity beyond the ego. A simple way to understand that also is by self-offering. We include God in the picture. We say, help me, as opposed to, I'm all alone, it's up to me, I have to figure out how to file this ITR. With no help, because, taxes are a funny thing. In fact, it's even a line that two things in life are certain, death and taxes. And so it reminds me of a scene from not a good movie at all, but there was basically the story is that the angel of death took on a human body to experience what human people live through and why they are afraid of death and so on. And at one point they're in a meeting and in a business meeting, and someone says, well, you know what two things are certain, death and taxes. And he looks at the person who doesn't know, and he says, death and taxes? These guys he says, death and taxes? Sort of like, I beg your pardon, but in fact it's true. In the old days it was, if you had this many parcels of land, you have to give this much to the king. And then in the days after that, it was VAT, and now it's GST. And who knows what it will be called in Treta Yuga, the Treta tax, who knows? But death and taxes will go on. Now, what do we become through these experiences? That's what gives them value. That's what gives them purpose. That's what makes sense out of all of this. Suppose we had some colossal failure in life. The point of it would be that we learned. Either we learned what mistakes we made that brought about that failure. Either we learned that, I was going to say, we depended too much on someone who perhaps wasn't able to share that trust or return that trust, even be worthy of that trust. Still, that was a mistake on our part, not a mistake on their part. Whatever mistakes they have made, let me clarify, that's their business and their problem. The point is, on what I'm going to bring this up. I realized I would like this up. I might as well explain. It has nothing to do with what I was saying, but when people are too close up, I don't know if it still does it, but it makes dark circles in the eyes, and so kind of a gangster look. And so back here, it shines in the eyes more, so you don't just have this empty skull talking to you. So, unfortunately, I talked too much and I lost the middle of that sentence. But whatever failings people have or mistakes on their part, that's their business. On our side, we have to see, was I wrong to trust too much? Look at the outcome. It doesn't mean, therefore, I shouldn't trust. But we can be overly trusting. Swamiji points out, never assume loyalty in anyone until you've seen them tested. Until you've seen that loyalty tested. Above all, someone else's loyalty should be to what? To me? No. To truth. To friendship, which is a principle more than my friendship. But still, as a consequence of that, someone sticking to those principles would also try to live by them as best they could. And that's another thing that Master said. Loyalty is the first law of God. And so that means, above all, was he saying, be loyal to me? No, be loyal to this organization, be loyal to this path. Welcome to level 1, please sign, I will always be loyal. You don't even know what you're being loyal to. You know, we work in the level 3 class on discipleship, saying, listen, read the vow. You want to know what you're getting into. It's only fair. You know, you read the contract because before you sign it. And it's a very loving contract, and it's not very specific. But that, above all, you want to understand even why you should be loyal, and again, what loyalty means, and what it entails, what you have to do to express your loyalty, and so on. But above all, that loyalty has to be to truth. Truth as you understand it, which would even mean that if you felt sincerely that you had to go to some other path after having pledged your loyalty to this one, you would have to do that. You would have to do what you think is right, even if it were a mistake. I'm not saying leaving this path would be a mistake. It might not be. But even if it were a mistake, better to do what you felt was the right thing to do than to stay thinking it was wrong. Now, if suppose you were supposed to stay, your inner voice might tell you. Some voice might be arguing, saying maybe you'd better not go. Yoganandaji, when he was a boy, had deep meditation, a strong sadhana, and so on. And he meditated morning and night and so on. He served, of course. He did many different things. But one day he was working very hard to serve people. It's a whole story of how it came about, but he spent the whole day cooking and serving food to many, many hundreds of, or may even been thousands of poor people. And so when he came home that night, he felt, okay, of course his body was exhausted, sore, and everything. And he thought, this is one night where I don't have to meditate. I've done a lot for Divine Mother today, and in fact, it's fitting that I should receive the gift of rest from her. But a little voice in his mind said, well, but you've never slacked off on your medication before. Wow, sorry. I'm getting in from Coimbatore, and then, it's been and he didn't say slacked off either. You've never failed in your meditative habit before. Why now? And he began to bargain with this voice. Well, but you see, I have given Divine Mother so much of seva today, and surely that must be pleasing to her. And then, besides, I've nearly broken my body in doing so. I need rest. Then this stubborn voice came back, saying, the aches and pains and bruises of your body are one thing to offer Divine Mother, but is it enough? What about the ache of your heart, the aching love of your heart for her? Why not offer that too? And this got his attention. This was a good argument. And so, this is from a book Swamiji has written called Stories of Mukunda. It's coming out as retitled as Stories of Yogananda's Childhood, so that everyone would understand if they didn't know Yogananda's boyhood name was Mukunda. And so Swamiji writes that Satan must have been afraid of this new good argument, that why not offer your aching heart's love as well? Because suddenly the thought came to Yogananda, oh, poor boy. I think he even writes it as he heard a voice saying, poor boy, he'll catch cold. He's not strong. He needs rest. Let him rest so he doesn't become ill. And so then Master realized whose voice he was hearing before, and he said, enough. And he threw the bed covers off the bed. He sat up straight in meditation and began to meditate. And he meditated for 5 minutes. Then he meditated for 15, then 30 minutes. His body was crying out, saying, surely this is enough by now. You weren't going to meditate at all, and now it's a half hour. Great. And he said, I will not rest until I feel Divine Mother's presence. And just then she came to him. And he felt that bliss. He felt that joy. He felt that unconditional, eternal love. All the aches and pains vanished. And then he remained in meditation throughout the rest of the evening, even into the morning. And he was more refreshed than he would have been just from a long sleep. And he went out the next day to serve the devotees all over again. So I found this story helpful. I was reading it as I was falling asleep one night. And I had meditated that night, so I felt, okay, good. But it reminded me of thinking about it the next night when, oh, yeah, I think tonight, technically it's midnight, so if I do my morning meditation, it counts as the same day. No, for me, bedtime means before you go to sleep, that's bedtime. It doesn't matter when. And so it's so helpful because just a little push, a little bit of effort, and suddenly we can break through a barrier. It isn't always that way. Sometimes it takes a lot of effort, repeated effort, continued effort. That's a different kind of growing. But a lot is just behind a lot is within our reach if we would just strain for it. One situation I was in, we went to visit a place that we were going to see if it would be suitable for an event. And the person, the host, was supposed to meet us there. And when we got there, they weren't there. We had a very narrow window of time that we could see this. And so we went. He wasn't there. And I was with my friend, and I just said, this is terrible. He was supposed to be here. We just have no time, and we have to know this. And now we can't see the place. I can't believe it. What are we going to do? And my friend, meanwhile, was nodding and smiling and went up to the door and just opened it, and it was open. And I thought, wow, isn't that amazing? First of all, I had this whole big experience, and my friend did too, listening to me. And it was all about nothing. What I was upset about, you could say, well, I could have learned to see it was all God's dream. It was more than God's dream. It was my dream. It was my false dream. The door was open the whole time. And here I was fretting about all these horrible implications of nothing that had happened and was going to happen. So that was a good lesson. If you're going to have a big emotional thrill, at least make sure that it's justified. That whatever you're upset about really has happened. In my case, it hadn't even happened. And yet I got to have an emotional cooking of my nerves anyway. The other lesson was, try the door. Maybe it's open. I see a door. What am I going to do? There's a door and it's closed. It's not locked. You try the door. And so in so many situations, if we could just give it an extra tap, the whole situation will unfold. But it's because we see, oh no, I couldn't possibly. Maya says, oh no, you're tired, or you don't know how to do that, and so on. I asked a friend of ours one morning when we were a little short-staffed this morning, you could say. I say short-staffed, we have one staff member, and so if we're short-staffed, it means he's gone. But I actually meant of all the volunteers, we didn't have our usual crowd. We had a different crowd, and it was wonderful. But it was a morning like that in Alwarpet, and so I said to my friend, would you be able to make the coffee? And he said, oh, I don't know how to make coffee. And I said, would you like to learn? He said, yes, I would like to. Here's the coffee, here's the milk, there's the on button. Wow, just add sugar. But the thing was that I could understand very well his reaction, because I've had that reaction too a lot, is that I don't know how to do it. It's funny. Sometimes it comes to people who actually are strong in certain ways, and they depend on that strength unnecessarily, and that they're not strong in other ways. I learned this when I started to learn a little bit about plumbing. I was thinking, someone said something, can you check why this plumbing problem is happening? I don't know plumbing. I know it has to do with wrenches and water, but beyond that, I don't know anything about it. And, it's just, I can't fix that. I can't even explain anything about it. And then I met a friend of mine who was just like, well, let's lift off the lid and take a look and see if there's water flow, see if the valve is on or off. And I realized that plumbing has a certain logic to it. And then I began to realize that, vector calculus has a certain logic to it. And, real analysis, algebraic fields have a certain logic to them. And I have understood those. And so maybe plumbing, too, has a certain logic. I've seen, in fact, many people have mastered that logic without vector calculus. So maybe I could try to understand this, too. But that was the way I had to talk myself into it. I found it works for a lot of things. Painting has a certain logic to it. Doorknobs and hinges have a certain logic to them. It's not that it has to... I don't know how to do that. That's way beyond me. Now, if you ask me to drill a hole, I would say that's way beyond my skill. Because when you need to get a drill in this world, it comes with a person, apparently, too, to use the drill. That's one thing I'm getting used to. So you have the drill expert comes who uses the drill for you. So it does make sense, actually, these drills that have to go like this to pound through the concrete. It's not that easy. So I digress. Coming back to this, that in life, all it takes is a little tap. Master just used, I will sit up and meditate even for 5 minutes. We can do that late at night when we are feeling tired. I just couldn't possibly. Well, let me try even for 5 minutes. No, 5 minutes, no way. That's all I meditate anyway. Okay, well, then 1 minute. Try it for something, sometime, just to prove to ourselves we can do it. Just to prove to ourselves we are not victims of circumstance. And I'm sorry, I got in today at 2 a.m. and then had to work until 4 a.m. I'm going to need to not meditate today. God will understand. Of course He'll understand. But we'll be saying this in the next lifetime too. God will understand why I don't meditate today. And if that's not scary enough for you, and I say this speaking for myself, I often think that how many lifetimes have I spent saying, well, God will understand why I'm not meditating tonight. Has it been 1,000 lifetimes? Not 1,000 nights, but 1,000 lifetimes going, Nalaki. So then if that scares me, that makes my blood run cold. How many times have I been to the same exact spot of spiritual realization and just hung out? You see? And I don't mean I'm at some high state at all. I just mean this same state, like thinking that I've learned something. How many times have I learned it already and forgotten? I say it to myself as a motivator. I don't say it to others because it might scare them. Suddenly the satsang room is empty. But it's a valid thought so that we don't become too complacent, too content. But it doesn't mean that to succeed, it's a huge far way off. I had this experience I shared with some of you with the technique of Kechari Mudra. What this is, if you're not familiar with it, is you take the tongue and you bring it back and put it up above the soft palate. It's a particular mudra used in meditation and in other things. And it's difficult to get your tongue to do anything, and it hurts and everything, but there are exercises you can do to stretch the tongue and so on. But when I felt my tongue was going back further and further and further, it was so sore. And I thought, by the way, in case you know a lot about Kechari Mudra, Master said never cut the frenum, this little string under the tongue, which some teachers do teach, and that's fine for them. I'm not here to argue, but Master was very strict to the point where one student had started to cut that, and his tongue started going numb. And Master said, I told you not to do that. It's dangerous and not necessary. So I was thinking my tongue was just hurting so much. How was I ever going to be able to get it into that position? And how, once it was in that position, was I possibly going to meditate just with tears, because of the pain? And I also thought, it's so sore and I have so far to go. I'm going to be working on this for years. And so actually, for years, I didn't even bother. I didn't even try because it's just going to take forever. Maybe when I'm 60, then I'll really start, getting in on it. And but every now and then I would come back to it. No, let me try. Because, I can feel there's certain stages where, first touch this, then touch that with your tongue, then you're getting close and so on. And it said you're getting close, and I thought, not me, not with this tongue. I don't have much of anything. The way I explained it later to someone was that I felt I was 10% of the way there, and that I had 90 more percent to go, and it was daunting. But in fact, I only had to take what was 10% and make it 11%. And then what happens is your tongue, once it clears this barrier, it slides forward and completely relaxes. And so you just have to cross that little threshold, and then you're there. No pain, all complete relaxation, no problem. And the nice thing is the more you put your tongue in Kachari Mudra, the more relaxed and stretched it gets that way too. And so I was almost there and just had to put a little more effort, and that little more effort stopped me for years, thinking that it was going to be a lot. It wasn't a lot. And I realized that can be a tendency in our natures and possibly in mine. Again, try the door, see if it's locked. Stretch the tongue, see, why not? If this is what we want, then why not go for it? Why hold back? And so, Master said, there are no, I'm paraphrasing from the autobiography of a yogi, the only barrier to spiritual attainment is man's unadventurousness. Isn't that such a nice and frightening word? Unadventurousness. Be a little adventurous. I mean, what else are we here for? But to grow, but to expand. And if everyone says no, 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 well, that's fine. But have a little adventure yourself. We went on an adventure yesterday to Coimbatore, many of us, to see Jyotishji and Deviji speak. And it was an adventure, as many of you who saw the photos of the journey and so on, the adventure in the train on the way there. And I mean, I never have been so desirous of joining an overnight train ride as I was when I saw those photos. Look at all the fun they're all having. That's great. And so then helping with the decorating and getting the hall ready. This was Ananda's first major event in this city. And so it was beautiful to see the devotees from Pune, the devotees from Chennai, and from other places coming together to put on this event for many people who were coming for the first time. And then it was also Jyotishji and Deviji's first visit to that city. And it was a little reminiscent for some of us, because we all know the story, most of us, of how Swamiji came to Chennai in 2013. And it was a similar situation where it was his first visit in recent times to Chennai. It was this first major Ananda event on this scale, and because 3,000 people came, so we have a center today. And so this was a little bit like that, because most of us weren't there. Some of us were there, but most of us weren't there. And so there's that, oh gosh, it would have been nice. We have the video, we can enjoy it that way. But this going to Coimbatore was a little bit like that. Now it was our turn to go to a new city, put on a big event with Jyotishji and Deviji and their first visit there, and just see what happens. And it was a wonderful thing. One of the people afterwards came up to us and said, if you didn't put on these events, how would we ever know about these teachings? And we can sometimes take that for granted, that, well, yeah, people find it on the internet, people find it on Facebook. If they're looking for it, they'll find it. If they hear about it, some uncle has autobiography of a yogi on his shelf he can give to them. And, people will find it. And it's nice to put on these big events. Sometimes people will feel doubtful of these big events. Well, but what if it rains and fewer people come? Or what if, this other thing is happening? Or, it's a lot of energy and so on. And it was so nice to have this man's answer, that how would we ever know? If you wouldn't put these things on, how would we know about these teachings? The masters make a big effort we just went to Coimbatore. We came from Chennai. They come from Hiranyaloka and come from God to here. That's a little more than a train ride. To tell us about these teachings, to help us to get free. It's for our sake. And so can't we do our little part of also trying to put out the energy to help others to find the same joy that we have found through these experiences? So this was a part of what was happening there yesterday. It was a beautiful evening, and the whole thing, Jyotishji and Davidji's lectures, of course, were the main event and very touching. Then also we had is there something going on outside that they're clearing some things out there? Okay, good to know. I sometimes am informed of things at the last minute, and this was not a big deal. Yesterday it was a little bigger of a deal. In the middle of the program, I suddenly heard, and now this Tamil book translation will be presented by Nayaswami Dharmarajan. And I was looking to see, and everybody was looking at me. And Dhyanaji said, you'd better go. And I was, what? And so I almost, is there some mistake? And so anyway, the person who had meant to inform me failed to inform me, and so I was unprepared. So anyway, the thing to remember, even in these events, what if we put on a huge event? All the marketing, all the advertising. Imagine what would we do? We'd put up banners in different parts of the city. I'm saying that as a joke because most of you here have done exactly that for Jyotishji and Davidji's event here, passing out flyers, putting up banners, spreading the word. And what if, not this time, but what if nobody came? Let's not envision that. But what if, really, no one came? And so what would it all be for? Or what if one person came? Let me start with that. So Swamiji had this experience in France. They put on this huge event, rented this big hall, all of this marketing and whatever it was, and on that night, one person came. Just one. And Jyotishji and Davidji were there. This was decades ago. And they said, Swamiji, there's just one person who's come. I don't know how many, 200, 300-seater hall, one person. And they said, we'll tell them that we're not having the program. And Swamiji said, no. He's come here to hear these teachings. He's come here to hear of Master. And so Swamiji just came down from the stage and took the chair next to the man and just started talking to him. He asked questions. They talked for, I think Davidji said, for an hour. Now, that's beautiful, and we can also remember that if we ever do have an event where fewer people come than we would expect. Believe me, I'm not trying to set some expectations here, so don't get me wrong. But still, think about, I was thinking of different lectures we've had in the past, different huge events, and we tend to remember, yes, the experience. If you can't remember, watch the video and so on. But then we also remember who came to the center because of that event, who was brand new and never heard about these teachings until that evening and then later took Kriya initiation. Or who, sometimes people are just new, they're just joining, but this event was the first time that they really served, that they really joined in with the family that way. And so in that way, it was very memorable too, to see who sort of woke up from this event. And so that's really the point, even if no one were to come, that what do we become through our service, through our efforts, through our raising of energy, through our struggle. There's a story told of a guru, a man who came for training, and the guru said to him, in order to receive my training, I want you to build... No, he didn't say that. I'm mixing up the stories. He basically said, in order to trying to find God is a hard thing. And so first I want to see you try to move this rock. There was a huge sort of boulder sticking up out of the ground. And so the man thought, fair enough. And so he began to push on the rock, and he, it wasn't moving at all. So then he started pulling on this side, and that didn't work. He figured, okay, tomorrow what I'll do is I'll try to break the rock. So he began, got some tools and started pounding on the rock, and it just wouldn't budge. Then he thought maybe he could get a lever under it. The next day he tried with a lever and couldn't jam it enough, or he finally got it in one place and pushed. Still, this thing wasn't moving. Then he went back to the, pushing and pulling approach, and by the end of it, after I think at least a week, he was completely defeated. Because here it was, he tried everything he could think of. He tried all of his strength, and it just wasn't enough. And so he went to the Guru very dejected, and he said, "I'm sorry, Guruji, I failed." And he said, "What are you talking about? You're doing very well." He said, "I haven't moved the rock at all." He said, "I didn't ask you to move the rock. I asked you to try to move the rock and see how strong your body has become. From this week of pushing, pulling, everything that you've done, you're much stronger physically than you were when you first came." And so again, what do we become through these experiences? How do we gain in strength? I mentioned before, what if we have some big outward failure and we say, okay, but what did I do wrong? What was my mistake? How can I learn? That's a good teaching, and it's a necessary teaching. It can also be, as anything, overdone. We can take it too far. We can start to blame ourselves for everything. This didn't work and it was all my fault. I should have known, and so on and so on. I can't believe now that I see what caused the problem that I didn't see it before. Or basically, sometimes we suffer from bad luck in an event. But instead of saying, oh, well, it was bad luck, we say, I can't believe I ruined everything. And so it's important to know that sometimes the lesson is not what did you do wrong, but the lesson is sometimes things just don't work out. No matter what you do, they don't work out. The rock doesn't move, even though we tried really hard. That's okay. Just accepting, this was the affirmation for today, acceptance. Just accepting, well, this didn't work out. Let me relax, trust that God knows what He's doing, and move on, rather than beating myself up over the head or racking my brain trying to figure out what could I have done so that this would not have happened. It's not always up to us, but it is up to us what effort we make, that we were sincere to our understanding, as I was saying earlier, that we did the best we could, that we're trying, and that we wanted to do a good thing. Once I was in a situation where things really fell apart, and a number of people were mad at someone and saying, and I just can't believe it, and you would think after all this, and I'm shocked, and on and on. And Dharmini was saying, I feel bad for that person because, everyone's mad at them, and, but it's just, I don't see, basically the conclusion of it all was, she said, they were sincere. The person who did it was sincere. They weren't trying to hurt anybody. They weren't trying to mess things up. They were trying to help. And what they had done was basically displease people's expectations. It wasn't that anyone got hurt, that some big outward thing. It was just some people didn't get it the way they wanted it, so they were mad. And even if they were justified in being mad, her point was the person doing it wasn't trying to hurt anyone. They were doing their best. So that should apply to us too. I'm not meant to be perfect in my understanding yet, but I'm trying to become perfect. So again, this includes not taking blame onto ourselves when we've done our best. Then give it to God. When we take blame onto ourselves, we're squeezing Him out of the picture, saying everything happens that's bad because of me. And it's all on if I didn't do it rightly, then it has all failed. Well, He's actually rotating this earth pretty well without us, doing a lot of things without us. Think about how busy He was before we were even born. Still, we see, at least from photos, that something was going on before we got here, and it will continue to go on after we leave until we come again. You see, it doesn't end. So, until it does. Master was asked, is there any end to evolution? He said, no end. You go on until you achieve endlessness. Such a beautiful answer. Meditate on endlessness. Meditate on infinity. I said to you earlier that what if you envision being at the same spot in a previous lifetime, I usually think of it when I have a big insight. Wow, I finally understood that it's important to be kind. This is amazing. I'm going to write this down. And then I think, God, how many lifetimes have I had this same revelation, and still I'm here. So let's get beyond this. I don't mean not to be unhappy with the revelation, but not to feel contented, not contented. Contented is a good thing. Not to feel complacent. I am good enough. I am spiritual enough for today. The problem with that thought is the answer to say, I am not spiritual enough ever. No, that's not the answer either. The answer is to say, God, I love you. God is great. In other words, not putting I in the picture. How much have I developed spiritually? How much have I grown in realization? How much have I become detached? You see, it's tricky how the ego slips in. It just becomes, I have a badge for detachment and I have a badge for humility and I wear it all the time so everybody can see. You see, it doesn't work. Still, the ego says you're not spiritual to get us off the path. And when that doesn't work, it says you're very spiritual. And then that will get us off the path. Yeah, I am. You see? And so don't think about where you are. Think about where you're going. Think about that joy that you want all the time. Think about God being with you. And so finally, this thought is not arbitrary. When I said, well, how many lifetimes have I come to the same spot? Master said to one disciple, who the disciple was wavering in his dedication, and Master said, you have a very complex karma. And if you leave now, it will take you 200 lifetimes to come back to the same spot where you are now. And Master was saying it to him obviously as a warning to encourage him to stay on the path. But the man just felt even more depressed or something, and then he was leaving. Master said, if you stay in tune, it can be just 6 lifetimes. You see? And so it can happen that we can have a complex karma. And so I don't mean it again to say as to scare you, that one wrong step and that's it, 150 more lifetimes. You should have thought of that before you pulled out in front of that other person. It's not like that. But rather, let us take advantage of the opportunity we have in this lifetime. This is something Master said too. He said of a situation where some disciples left, he said, I didn't throw them out. Divine Mother threw them out. And he said they weren't taking advantage of the opportunity they had here. It doesn't mean they weren't good enough so that they were, marked as deficient and kicked out. That's just the ego again trying to say, yeah, that's me. Oh God. No, it's not. It's that their karma was such. They were getting pulled. They were not choosing. I would have to say probably it also meant they were not sincere fully. I don't say it as a criticism. I just say that because what would it mean? He couldn't say they weren't succeeding enough. None of us are succeeding enough as we want until we're free, but that we're trying. He said to someone, I don't ask that you overcome temptation. I ask that you resist it. You see, it's such a healthy and helpful and practical teaching. It isn't that the devotee never gets mad. So as soon as I become mad, I'm ruined myself as a devotee. A devotee never feels temptation or gives into it. As soon as I give in, I am bad. No, Master said very directly, I ask that you resist. Try. Resist even means wanting to resist. Lord, I want to resist this, but I can't. Ha jalebi. But even a thought that in that direction of, I think I only have 150 left in this lifetime to eat, and so then I'll be done. But you see, wanting to resist, wanting God, because that God will give you that joy that never goes. So let us take advantage. We've come to the path, we've found the path, we're clear on what we want in life. We have a meditation technique, we have a sadhana, we have a spiritual community. We have a large greater family just beyond this community here in Chennai. And so we have our heads screwed on straight, finally, mostly, compared to how they were before. And so take advantage. There's a saying among farmers, make hay while the sun shines. And so it's the same thing here, that take advantage of this opportunity and go all the way so you can make it in this lifetime. God bless you.